Hello, this is Mohammed. I'm back with the part 5 of the tutorial of Employee Vaccination Management System. Last time we kind of built a nice navigation system and also got a background of our web application. So your code should be something like this, and also your application should look something like this. Anyway, today we will actually install a database, and with our MySQL database we will hook this data up, vaccine types, and this page up with the database. Alright, let's get going. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is open a new tab and then type something like MySQL community server. Sure, sounds good. And then click on this first link that comes out, download MySQL community server. Of course, I am on Windows, so by default it actually finds out what platform you're on. So I'm gonna go on, and I like to get the Windows installer actually instead of just downloading the zip. So I'm gonna go to the download page from here, and there's two versions. One basically says it's a web community installer, and this is kind of like the installer. So the difference is when you click on this and download, it kind of downloads and installs from the web type thing, and this one will download the whole package first, then you can install it. So I prefer actually this one. So that's just me, but you could do either one of them, that would work. And this would download about 422 meg. So I already downloaded it, so I'm not going to download it again, and it's right here. It's going to look something like this, this is a Microsoft installer package. So once you get that downloaded, then what you want to do is either right click and you could say install, of course, and let the install going. It's running the installer now. We'll go through the install process. Alright, it seems like it's coming up, so it will bring up something like this. Now of course you can choose any one of them. What I like to choose is developers default will probably give you most of the stuff, but I like to choose custom to select exactly what I want to install. So I would choose custom, do next, and we don't need all of these. Of course, you're welcome to install anything that you need. But I'm going to go ahead and expand the server. That's the first thing I'm going to need. Select this, click on this arrow to say that's the option I want. And the only other thing that we're going to need for this is the Workbench, which is kind of like the IDE to run or write queries or look at the tables. So select that and next. That's the only thing I would need for this. But again, there's other options. You could install the connectors, documentation, and all that, but I'm just gonna choose only these two for now for this. And click next, and it shows you what you chose, and I'm just gonna say execute. Let it install. It took some time, but it will eventually install. You got two checkboxes, which is good. That's green. Click on next. It just says now we're ready to configure your server. Okay, sure. Click on next and leave everything default. I don't typically change any of this stuff, the port numbers and the default configurations. So just click next, and it's just saying that you have to use a strong password for this. Okay, and then we're gonna say fine and click next, and here just make sure that you remember your password. This is the root main password that will have access to everything in the database. So I'm just going to type my password. Yeah, it's a little weak, but that's fine. It's just local anyway. Then one other thing what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a user, because this is the user we're going to use for our Employee Vaccination Management Systems schema. So I'm going to call that evms. I'm going to give it a DV admin. That's the default role, which is fine. And I'm going to choose a password, of course, and it says wait, that's fine, I don't care, and say okay, and it created my user in there, and then click next and leave that default. That's just going to install my Windows services, which is okay, I don't mind. I'm going to uncheck that because I don't want this thing to be automatically started. I'm just going to leave that as is and let that execute. Let's see. Okay, everything is done. All checks, and then click on finish, and then everything is done. It says okay, go ahead, click next, And here I like these options because I install also Mysql Workbench, so I want that to get started right away. So I'm going to leave that checked. Finish. That's supposed to bring the Mysql Workbench. When the Workbench launches, you should see something like this, but don't worry about, I have a whole bunch of entries because I got other stuff in here, but yours may be just clean. So what I want you to do is then click on this plus, and then we're going to create a new connection, and we call the user to be evms. I'm going to call the connection evms, log in as the evms, don't want to use root, and then go ahead, test the connection, leave everything else default, says localhost and your port. And then ask you for the password, put the password, you save, say OK. You successfully made the connection, just click OK. I'm gonna say OK. What happens is it creates this thing, so next time you come in, you can just click on it and it will automatically be logging in. Okay, so now this is kind of like the IDE for the MySQL, where you can kind of write SQL, create new tables, create schemas and stuff like that. I have the role DBA for the user evms, so that's why I kind of see more or less a lot of things. What I like to do next is click on this plus right here. That's going to give you this SQL prompt, and I'm going to start writing SQLs. Okay, what we'll do is we will open this SQL window where we can write script to create the tables. So I already wrote it, so in order to save time, I'm just going to go ahead and paste it here, and I'm going to just explain what this is. So the first three lines basically drops and creates the database, and then we're going to try to drop the table if the table exists, which it doesn't for the first time. Then we're going to create a table, and table consisting of the name and description. The name would be the primary key, kind of like the actual vaccine name. Is it COVID-19? Is it Ebola? Is it polio? Is it something else? The description basically has a little more details about the vaccine. That's how kind of we had it. If you recall, get a name and description. So this is what we're going to put inside the database or the table. And then this is a standard good practice. You want to just find out when it was created. It's a created date time, because it's not null, and by default it's going to be the current timestamp, and who created it, the name of the person. So that's the varchar 100, not null of course. And then the other two that is a good practice is when was the last time it was updated. So this is the who created the very first time, and you may have been updating this multiple times. So who was the last person that updated this, which was updated by, and one time it was updated. So that's these two. And then of course those three sample data that we just added, so we are inserting those records right there. COVID-19, the description, and the timestamps, and I just put my name. This is last updated date and last updated by. So we just put three rows in there. So let's go ahead and run it. So the way we do it is just click on this thunder. And there you go. It did it again. And of course, the nice thing about the script is I can run multiple times. It will just start from drop and recreate it. So it's there. Now, you want to see it, you go click on this refresh thing and it shows up here. There you go. There's a database evms, and there's only one table right there, and you have to see that the data that you created, you can just right click and just select rows, and it opens kind of another little SQL tab, and then it shows you the data right here. All it does is it runs select star from the table. So there's all the data that we added. Okay, a good practice is, now that we have a script, let's go ahead and save that script. What I like to do is I typically like to create a Sql directory underneath the project and then put the script there. So let's save script as, and we're going to go to the directory where we have our projects. So this is part 5, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new directory here, so I can just go ahead and do it by new folder and call it SQL. It's a new folder in case I have multiple scripts. Go in there and save it as evms, and it will automatically put the .sql there. So save it that way. We have it saved in case we need it. We can always bring it back and then rerun the script. Alright, at this point we're going to come back to Eclipse. Okay, now that we have a database, let's see how we can hook this up with our actual application. The first thing we're going to do is in your Eclipse, you go to Help and then click on Eclipse Marketplace. And then we're going to install a plugin for Hibernate. It's called JBoss Tools. Just search for that. It takes some time to find it. Alright, so this is the one that we want, JBoss Tools Final, and go ahead, click on Install. And let it do its thing. Now, it will try to give you all kinds of tools for JBoss. You don't need all of that. You're welcome to install all of that if you really want. All I'm going to need is Hibernate tools. So I'm going to uncheck the whole thing. Otherwise, it's going to take forever to install. And I only need Hibernate tools. And again, there are all of the good stuff that you can have with this, but we're not going to use it at this moment. So just only check Hibernate tools, and it will automatically install whatever else it needs. So go ahead, click confirm. After installing, it may require to restart your Eclipse, which you can do. Okay, you may get a prompt like this. Just click on install anyway. Then once done, you may get a window like this. Restart now, and just go ahead, click on this. We'll restart. Okay, now that we have our Eclipse up, the first thing we want to do is we added the Hibernate JBoss tools. Now we need to add some libraries in our Maven configuration. So the first thing we want to do is right here, we need to add the Jdbc driver for MySQL and the Spring Boot JPay data starter tool. So these two I just added. One is for MySQL, the dependency MySQL connector Java, and Org Spring Framework Boots Spring Boot starter data JPA. So these two you would need. So go ahead, add that, save this. The next thing is, since we install the JBoss tools, one of the things you will see is there will be a new perspective that you can open. So of course, this one, if you click on this little plus sign right here, it says open perspective. Right now we are on the JEE perspective, and this is the debug perspective. So if I click on the plus, this is the new option that you will have, Hibernate perspective. So go ahead, select that, click open, and that will give you this new perspective right here, Hibernate. So go ahead, click on that tab, and you will also see that little round thing here that's there too. So now you can switch back and forth between JEE and Hibernate. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to go click on this second tab, package, highlight the project, right click, go to new, and create a Hibernate configuration file, cfg.xml. And it's going to bring this, and it's going to choose, we're going to create it in main Java, which is fine. That's the name of the file. Go ahead, click next. And here we are going to select database dialect would be MySQL. Driver class would be exactly this, com.mysql jdbc driver. Then our jdbc URL should be exactly this if you followed the previous steps properly by installing the MySQL database and the evms users and the databases with this script. This should be exactly the same. The default schema would be evms, your username would be evms, and the password is whatever the password you put. I put my password as this, and go ahead, check this box that will create the configuration default automatically. Click next, and here everything leave default. Go ahead, click finish, and it actually automatically created this file for us, and of course it also created the configurations. If you go to the first tab, here's the configuration. If you expand it, now it will try to read the database, and it did. And then go ahead, expand it, and voila, there is our database schema that we created, VMS, and you also know there is a table. So now what we're going to do is, using this information, we'll try to reverse engineer from table. We're going to create object relational mapping. That is what will help us with Hibernate to read this table data. Okay, let's go back to the package and right click here, and then we're going to do another new, and we're going to try to create a file called Hibernate reverse engineering file. Go ahead, click on that, and yes, that's the project we want it on. Click next, And of course you can click refresh just to see that it will read it. Now you can choose also this configuration. It's the default one that's already got created, and you will see that it automatically read everything. Now here it basically says what tables you want it to include, so you can expand this and choose vaccination type. That's the only table we got. Click on include, and I will put that on this side, and go ahead and click finish. So now that we created this file, the next thing is we're going to go ahead now generate the actual ORM. So right now, of course, we don't have any object relational mapping. As you could see, we got only two files, which is evms application Java and vaccination type controller. So the next thing you want to do is there's this little icon that is kind of like looks a little bit of run, and then little Hibernate logo in there. So go ahead, click on this little drop down here and select Hibernate code generation configuration. That'll bring this up, and then highlight this and just double click on it. It will create a default one. Just call this evms configuration, and then you need to choose a console configuration, which is we already created one. It will be on the list, evms part 5. And the output directory is of course where we want our Java files to be created. So that would be of course in source main Java. That would be the directory where we want to create the actual Java files. Go ahead, click OK. And then you definitely wanted to check this reverse engineering from Jdbc connection. Click on that, and then you wanted to say what package you want it to be in. We put everything else in SQL tutorial.evms. So what we're going to do is we're going to say SQL tutorial that package.evms, and then I like to put all of my ORMs in a sub package called model. That's where we're going to put it in. Then it will ask what is your reverse engineering XML. We have one we just created earlier, so click on setup and say use existing, expand that project and highlight this, the one that got created, say OK. You can leave everything else default and go ahead and click apply, and then go to the exporter tab and then select two things. One is generate EJB3 annotations, and check this box domain code. But that basically says that we're gonna generate the ORMs with annotations, and we're just only going to create one file per table, roughly, unless there is a composite primary key, and then just hit apply. I'm not going to run this right now. We'll come back to this. Go ahead, click close. One other change that we need to do is go back here and highlight the configuration, right click and say edit, and change that Hibernate version to 4.3 so that we get good annotations. And then go ahead, click apply and click OK. Just to be sure, just right click here and just say rebuild configuration, and then go ahead, come back to the package. So we're going to come back here, and then the next thing we're going to do is go ahead, refresh this and select this configuration and say OK. And of course we already know we chose vaccination type. That's good. Let's go back, click on this drop down again, click on Hibernate code generation configuration and choose this, and everything looks good. And then go ahead, click on run. And it ran and looks like it generated our model. If you look on the left, there's one new package right here. So you can expand that, and if you double click on the Java file, you will see there's a nice model class created. Everything, basically it generated the object relational mapping based on the table that we selected, vaccination type, and with the proper annotation. The first thing you want to do is there's a little underline here, put your mouse over there and just click on add a default serialization ID. So let it be there and go ahead, save that. Okay, I think we'll wrap up for today. What's going to happen is next time we're going to go ahead and first write a JUnit test case to make sure that the ORM we generated works fine by writing a little piece of code that will use this ORM to fetch the data, and we'll see it on the showing up on the console. After that happens, after a test is successful to make sure that we can read the data from the database using a test case, then we'll go back to our application and use that ORM to fetch the data, and of course then we'll build an edit screen and so on. That's going to be about it today, and I will put the part 5 again in the GitHub as I did in the other last 2 tutorials. So look for that as well, and I'll put the link in the description below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.